Launching into a new year, I can't help but look back at everything that happened in my life over the last 12 months. There have been a lot of changes, which I've had to figure out how to process. Big changes in life can be a lot for anyone to process. As someone that has an admittedly bad habit of pushing problems to the side to deal with them later, in the most vague sense of the word, I wanted to talk about that. First, I want to say that big life changes is a term that can encompass a lot of different situations. It can mean anything from moving out, losing a job, losing a loved one, dealing with a chronic health problem, or receiving news about any of the above, or it can be any sort of big news or change. So, why do we need time to process change? Change often contains a lot of smaller factors. So, while the big overwhelming change is what is seen, it can be that what's being processed, sometimes almost like a background task in our brains, is those smaller parts of the big change. Losing a job isn't just that you don't have a job anymore, for example, it's that there isn't income, but also losing the routine, the stability, even the relationships, and having to get that all back again. That's a lot to process, and that's if the situation is simplified. Real life can have a lot more factors at play, even with just that situation. Like, if you have family to support, for example. Sometimes all of that background processing can't be done right away. To continue this sort of brain as a computer metaphor, sometimes we aren't equipped with the proper programming to process these things, or sometimes it isn't the right time. Some people are taught that you shouldn't be emotional around other people. This can be taught explicitly or just with how the people around you react to emotions, like anger or sadness, even with some people experiencing abuse if they show emotion. This can lead to people not processing or feeling these emotions until later in a safer place, often alone. This brings me to Peter Lang's emotional processing theory, which basically says that the way people react and process their emotions is based on their experiences and their memories. Like, experiencing trauma can lead to faults or issues with how one processes emotion, even leading to fears, phobias, or disorders, like OCD or PTSD. I often feel that my reaction to stress is to subconsciously spin what I call the wheel of reactions, which will eventually land on one unhealthy coping mechanism or another. Now, of course, this is just a kind of a crappy joke I use to cope, but I want to say that I don't immediately start spinning the wheel of reactions at the slightest sign of stress. I think, at least for most of us, these big reactions are a result of a stress overflow. Stress builds, and I think the simplest way that I can explain the accumulation of stress is through what I like to call the shaken pop bottle effect. Stress can feel a lot like the carbonated pressure in a bottle of pop. The bottle is shaken and the beverage fizzes up, bubbling to the surface like our emotions. If you shake the bottle of stress pop once, it'll bubble up a little bit, but probably be fine overall. If you shake it again, it's a little less fine. With a bit of time to cool down, things may even go back to normal. However, the more you shake it, the more back-to-back stresses are in your life, and the more likely the explosion could be or lead to a big reaction, like those seen on my aforementioned wheel of reactions. Now, I've used the pop bottle theory a lot in my day-to-day life to explain stress and even to remind myself to step back, take a breather when life's had a lot of stressful shakeups. Something that I've been learning and realizing recently, however, is how consciously taking steps to process these stresses and emotions can help mitigate the explosions of stress. Processing your stress is kind of like opening up the bottle. Yes, the overflow of pop emotions can still happen, especially if there have been a lot of stressful shakeups. Sometimes that overflow can be explosive, angry, at a breaking point, and sometimes it can be a steady stream over the edges, crying, talking it out. And other times yet, by opening up about our emotions and stress, the overflow is avoided entirely. So, how do we open the bottle of emotions and process the stress and changes in life? From what I've found, these are the main steps that most professionals have laid out and recommended. 1. Identify or label the feelings brought up by these big changes. 2. Talk it out, write it down. Try to put some names to the things that you're feeling. 3. Then give yourself time to actually feel and experience these emotions. 4. Practice some self-care by reaching out to friends and loved ones. Ask for help if you want to talk it out. This is something I found that really helps me. I need to be able to talk through problems and situations in order to understand them. For me, reaching out to others also really helps me in the next step as well. 5. Accept the feeling and the situation. 6. Then you can decide how to respond and to handle the situation itself. Let's go back to the previous example of losing a job with these steps. Identify the emotions you're feeling with that loss. Talk about them and give both yourself and your emotions space and time to exist. Then, once you can say, okay, this is the situation I'm in, I lost a job, alright, what's next? Then you're ready for those next steps. You can start the process of starting to look for a new job and finding that solution to the problem that you're facing. Let's say your emotions aren't processed right away. I'm looking at you, my fellow stuff the emotions down and deal with them in the most vague sense of the word later people. It can sometimes take a long time to get to a place where there is enough mental processing power to deal with a big change. Sometimes by pushing these emotions down, it can mean that multiple big changes, multiple large stressors, can happen. This can add to the explosion of the shaken pop bottle. So instead of letting the explosion happen, you tighten the lid on the bottle to keep the stress from overflowing until later. Unprocessed emotions can show up in a lot of ways. It can manifest in day-to-day life, like outbursts of anger, depression, sudden crying spells, distancing yourself from others, feeling emotionally numb, or feeling anxious and high-strung. These unprocessed emotions can also manifest as physical symptoms, like pain or an upset digestive system. Bottling emotions can often lead people to unhealthy habits or coping mechanisms, like drinking alcohol or gambling. It can even become a sort of habit to bottle away emotions instead of dealing with them. This is something that I'm trying to do less, but I'm far from perfect. Some ways that I've found helpful in processing my emotions are journaling about the experience that I'm feeling now, talking to some trusted people, including a therapist if I have one at the time, and to track my triggers and emotions as they well up, at least if I can. This is a video based mostly on my experiences, what I've found helpful, and the information I've found, especially info that have helped my experiences. As with everything I make, I'm not an expert at any of this. I know that this can be a lot of information to sum up, and can be definitely summed up as easier said than done. And I know I've been there way too much. I get it. This was information that I found useful when processing info about big changes. I hope that you've also found it helpful. If you have any mental health or LGBTQIA+ topics you'd like to see covered, please let me know down in the comments. As always, my resources are in the description. Thanks for watching the OCD NB. Stay safe out there.